The scent of pine and roasting turkey filled the house, a perfume I had spent a lifetime perfecting. It was the smell of Christmas Eve, of home, of a life built with intention and care. I moved through the familiar rooms, a conductor overseeing her orchestra. A final adjustment to the holly sprig on the mantelpiece, a gentle nudge to a silver dessert fork that had strayed from its place. Outside, the snow fell in thick, silent flakes, painting our street in a pristine layer of white, muffling the world beyond our warm, golden windows. This was my sanctuary, this beautiful, orderly house, and tonight it would be filled with the sound of my family. The first to arrive were Sarah and David, their two young children tumbling through the doorway in a whirlwind of mittens, snow boots, and exuberant shrieks. Sarah, my daughter, her cheeks flushed from the cold, enveloped me in a hug that still smelled of the lavender perfume I had bought her as a girl. "Everything looks perfect, Mom," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion that made my own throat tighten. David, ever the quiet anchor, stacked presents with meticulous care under the tree, his presence a calm counterpoint to the children's joyful chaos. Then came the sound of Robert's car, the deep purr of the engine I knew as well as my own heartbeat. I watched from the window as he and Maya stepped out. Robert, my husband of 35 years, his hair more silver now than the dark chestnut of our youth, but still carrying himself with that quiet, solid confidence that had first drawn me to him. And Maya, her arm linked through his, her laughter a bright, crystalline sound that carried across the frosty air. She was beautiful, there was no denying it. A full decade younger than Robert, she possessed a vibrancy that seemed to defy the passage of time, her style always just a little more fashionable, a little more daring than the rest of us. They entered, bringing a gust of cold air and the subtle, expensive scent of Maya's perfume. Robert leaned down to kiss my cheek, his lips cool against my skin. "The house smells incredible, Clara," he said, his voice a low rumble that had always felt like home. "It is all coming together," I said, brushing a speck of lint from his lapel, a habitual wifely gesture. "Go on, hang up your coat. Dinner is almost ready." I watched them move into the living room. Robert immediately gravitated toward his grandson, scooping the giggling boy into his arms, while Maya stood for a moment, slightly apart, surveying the scene. There was a tension there, a subtle friction I had learned to categorize as their usual. Robert was reserved, a man of few words who showed his affection through actions, not grand declarations. Maya was all declaration, a creature of effusive compliments and dramatic gestures. She often seemed to be performing the role of the perfect stepmother, a role she had inhabited for only 5 years, and sometimes the effort showed. I saw the way her smile tightened just a fraction when Robert did not immediately turn to include her in his conversation with David. I saw the way Robert's shoulders stiffened slightly when she called him my darling in that particularly theatrical tone. I dismissed it. It was their dance, their awkward but ultimately harmless dynamic. Every family has its quirks. Dinner was a lively affair. The table groaned under the weight of glazed ham, buttery mashed potatoes, green beans almondine, and my grandmother's sweet potato casserole. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, punctuated by the children's laughter. Robert was quieter than usual, his attention seeming to drift toward the window, toward the dark stillness of his home office, a detached building at the end of our garden path. Maya, perhaps sensing his distraction, became more animated, telling a long, elaborate story about a charity gala she had attended. "And the speaker was just so inspiring," she was saying, her hands fluttering gracefully. "He spoke about the importance of seizing the moment, of not waiting for happiness to find you." She glanced at Robert, but he was staring into his wine glass as if searching for answers in the deep red liquid. A faint, almost imperceptible frown touched her lips before the brilliant smile snapped back into place. "But enough about that. Clara, this ham is divine. You must give me the recipe." "It is a secret," I said lightly, though the recipe was written on a stained index card in my kitchen drawer. It was a small piece of territory, a tiny kingdom I ruled, and I was not quite ready to surrender it. As dessert plates were cleared, a contented drowsiness settled over the table. The children were growing sleepy-eyed, and Sarah was beginning to gather their things. It was then I remembered the wine. The special bottle. A 1982 Bordeaux that Robert and I had been saving for a truly momentous occasion. Our 40th wedding anniversary was still 5 years away, but tonight, surrounded by my family, the air thick with love and the promise of Christmas, it felt momentous enough. "I have a surprise," I announced, standing up. "A very special wine for a very special night. Robert, I am going to fetch that bottle from your office." A shadow, swift and dark, passed over Robert's face. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a look of mild surprise. "The office? Clara, it is a mess in there. Let me get it." "Do not be silly," I said, already moving toward the back door, pulling on my wool coat. "You stay with everyone. I know exactly where it is. In the cabinet behind your desk, is it not?" He opened his mouth as if to protest further, but I was already stepping out into the cold. The snow crunched under my boots, the only sound in the hushed night. The path to the office was short, lined with low lights that cast long, dancing shadows. The office was Robert's sanctuary, a place of leather-bound books and quiet contemplation. He rarely invited anyone in, not even me, a boundary I had always respected. It was his space, and I had never felt the need to intrude. I fumbled with the key, my fingers stiff with cold, and pushed the heavy wooden door open. The room smelled of him, old books, polished wood, and a faint hint of his cologne. A single desk lamp cast a soft, intimate pool of light onto the large oak desk. The room was, as he had said, uncharacteristically untidy. Papers were strewn across the surface, and a single, framed photograph of our family, taken last Christmas, lay on its side. My eyes scanned the room for the wine cabinet, and then they stopped. They stopped on the desk. There, sitting squarely in the center of the green leather blotter, were 2 crystal wine glasses. They were not dusty or stored away. They were clean, gleaming in the lamplight, as if they had been recently rinsed and placed there. But one of them was not entirely clean. One of them bore a distinct, unmistakable mark on its delicate rim. A smear. A deep, berry-red stain, the exact shade of the lipstick Maya had been wearing when she walked through my door not 2 hours ago. The world did not shatter. It did not explode. Instead, it simply stopped. The cheerful noises from the house vanished. The cold air ceased to exist. There was only the glass and the mark, and the silent, accusing emptiness of the second glass beside it. A cold dread, colder than the winter night outside, began in the pit of my stomach and spread through my veins like ice. This was not a glass from a business meeting. This was not a glass from a solitary drink. This was an intimate pairing. A shared moment, in his private sanctuary, a place he rarely allowed others to enter. My hand trembled as I reached for the special bottle of wine from the cabinet. The glass felt smooth and deathly cold in my grasp. I turned and walked out, locking the door behind me, my movements automatic, robotic. The walk back to the house seemed to take a lifetime. Each step was heavy, leaden. I could see them through the window, my family, a tableau of domestic bliss. Robert was laughing at something David had said, his face relaxed and open. Maya was whispering to Sarah, a conspiratorial smile on her perfectly painted lips. I pushed the door open, the warmth of the house hitting me like a physical blow. I forced my lips into a smile, a fragile imitation of the joy I had felt just minutes before. "I have it," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. I held up the bottle, a precious relic from a past that now seemed like a lie. Robert looked at me, and for a single, horrifying second, his eyes flickered toward the office and then back to me, and I saw a flash of something in his gaze, not guilt, but a sudden, sharp wariness. And in that moment, the beautiful, perfect night began to unravel, stitch by painful stitch, and the smile on my face felt like the hardest performance of my life. The laughter from the dining room was a distant, jagged sound, like glass breaking in another room. I could hear them all out there, my children, my grandchildren, the warm hum of a family in celebration. But in the kitchen, where I stood gripping the edge of the cold granite countertop, there was only a ringing silence. My own private vacuum. The world had tilted on its axis during dessert, and I was the only one who had felt the shift. My mind was a broken projector, replaying the same 2-second clip on a loop. Robert's hand, the one that had held mine for 4 decades, resting on the small of Maya's back as they stepped into the hall. It was not a fleeting touch. It was a gesture of possession, of intimacy, and her laugh that followed, a little too high, a little too practiced. Every interaction I had ever witnessed between them now cast itself in this new, garish light. The late nights at the office he had blamed on a demanding client. The sudden business trips that coincided with her husband's out-of-town rotations. The way he always defended her, called her a good sort when I expressed any minor irritation. I had been so blind. The foundation of my life, a marriage I had believed was as solid and unshakable as the old oak in our backyard, was revealed to be nothing more than a carefully constructed stage set. "Clara, the kids are asking for more of your apple pie." Robert's voice at the kitchen doorway was a jolt. He was smiling, his face a mask of paternal contentment. For 40 years, I had looked at that face and seen honesty. Now, I saw the delicate cracks in the performance, the slight tightening around his eyes. "There is more on the sideboard," I said, my own voice sounding thin and foreign. I turned to the sink, pretending to scrub a already clean plate. I could not look at him. "Are you feeling all right, dear? You have been quiet since dinner." He moved closer, and I could feel the heat of his body, a proximity that now felt invasive. "I am just tired," I lied. "It is a lot of hosting." He placed a hand on my shoulder, a hand that had just been on her. I flinched, a tiny, involuntary spasm I hoped he would mistake for the soap suds on my skin. "You work too hard, let me help clean up." "I would prefer to do it myself," I said, too quickly, too sharply. He hesitated, his hand dropping away. I felt his confusion, but I did not care. The weight of his secret was a physical thing on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and hollow conversation. I watched them. Oh, I watched them. I saw the way their eyes met across the room, a silent communication that excluded everyone else. I saw the way Maya patted his arm, a gesture that lasted a fraction of a second too long. The festive lights strung across the patio seemed to pulse with a sickly rhythm. The joyful chatter of my grandchildren was a cacophony I wished would stop. The entire house, my home, had become a claustrophobic box of lies. Finally, the last car pulled out of the driveway. The silence that descended was profound and heavy. Robert sighed contentedly, stretching his arms above his head. "A good night, do you not think? Everyone seemed to have a wonderful time." I did not answer. I stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by the detritus of our family life, the abandoned wine glasses, a child's forgotten toy, a photo album left open on the coffee table to a picture of our wedding day. I felt like a ghost in my own museum. "Robert," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "I saw you with Maya." He froze, his hands still in the air. Then the performance began. He lowered his arms, forcing a puzzled frown. "Saw what with Maya? We were just saying goodbye. John had already taken the baby out to the car." "Do not do that," I said, the words icy. "Do not insult my intelligence. I saw the way you touched her. I saw the way you look at her. It is not the first time." His face shifted, the genial mask slipping to reveal a flash of panic before being replaced by weary exasperation. It was a masterful transition. "Clara, for heaven's sake, you are imagining things, you are tired. Maya is a colleague, a friend. She has been a great support with the Henderson account. We have had to work very late these past few months. You know that." "A late work meeting?" I pressed, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Is that what you call it? What kind of meeting requires a hand on the small of a woman's back in a darkened hallway?" He ran a hand through his silver hair, a gesture I had always found endearing. Now it looked like a stall tactic. "It was a crowded room. It was an innocent gesture. You are reading far too much into a simple act of courtesy. You are being paranoid." The word hung in the air between us. Paranoid. A word designed to make me feel small, to make me doubt the evidence of my own eyes, the screaming instinct in my gut. But his excuse was flimsy, a cobweb that dissolved under the slightest scrutiny. The pain I felt was so acute it was a physical ache, but it was eclipsed by a cold, relentless fury. He thought he could talk his way out of this. He thought I was the same trusting Clara who would believe anything he said. "I see," I said softly, turning away from him. "I must be tired. I think I will go to bed." The relief on his face was palpable. He thought he had won. "Good idea, dear. We will talk more in the morning when you have had some rest." I walked up the stairs, each step a conscious effort. I got into bed beside him, lying rigid on my side, listening to the sound of his breathing slowly deepen into the rhythms of sleep. I waited for an hour, then two, watching the digital clock on his nightstand cast a faint red glow on the ceiling. When I was certain he was in a deep sleep, I slipped out from under the covers. The floorboards were cold beneath my bare feet. I moved through the dark house like a thief, a ghost in the home I had built. His office was at the end of the hall, a room that had always been his sanctuary. The large mahogany desk, a gift from his father, seemed to loom in the darkness. I started with the drawers. The top ones held the usual: pens, paper clips, old receipts. I moved to the lower, deeper drawers. Files, tax documents, nothing of note. My hands were trembling. What was I looking for? A love letter, a receipt for jewelry I never received. Then I remembered. The small, fireproof lockbox he kept on the top shelf of the closet, the one he said held our passports and birth certificates. I had never had a reason to question it. I dragged a chair over, my heart in my throat, and lifted it down. It was not locked. The click of the latch echoed in the silent room. On top of the passports, exactly where they should have been, was a slim, cheap-looking smartphone. A phone I had never seen before. A cold dread, colder than anything I had felt all evening, seeped into my bones. My hand shook as I pressed the power button. It lit up, demanding a passcode. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. A fresh wave of pain washed over me. What date could be more important than the day he married me? Then, a terrible thought occurred to me. I typed in Maya's birthday, a date I knew from the office birthday calendar. The screen unlocked. The world stopped. The Messages app was a torrent of intimacy. Months and months of them. Pet names I had not heard since we were young, jokes that were not funny to anyone but them. Discussions about my naivety, my predictability. Descriptions of moments stolen in his car, in a park, in a hotel bar across town. My vision blurred as I scrolled, each word a shard of glass shredding the last 40 years. They had planned this. They had laughed about me. And then I saw it. A message from earlier that very day. A confirmation. A hotel reservation for this coming Saturday night. The Royal Palms Hotel. The names on the reservation were not Robert and Maya. They were Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The irony was so cruel it was almost funny. A fake name for a fake marriage. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I did not pick it up. I stood there, gripping the edge of the desk, the solid wood, the only real thing in a universe that had just evaporated. It was not just a shock. It was a demolition. Every shared memory, every hardship overcome, every quiet morning drinking coffee together, it was all rendered false. The love I had built my life upon was a fiction. The man sleeping down the hall was a stranger. I did not cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a hollowing out, a complete and utter collapse. I looked at the wedding photo on his desk, our young, hopeful faces smiling blindly into a future that was now a lie. And in the oppressive silence of the night, a single, terrifying thought began to form, cutting through the devastation like a shard of ice. He thinks I do not know about Saturday. A slow, grim resolve tightened in my chest, a foreign and frightening emotion that pushed aside the grief, if only for a moment. I knew what I had to do. The first light of Christmas Day was a liar. It painted the frost on the lawn in delicate, glittering strokes and cast long, hopeful shadows through the bay window. It was a light that promised peace, the kind of peace that follows a long night. But my night had not ended. It had simply solidified into this cold, clear resolve that sat in my chest like a stone. The house was silent, a cathedral of sleeping lies. Upstairs, Robert slept the untroubled sleep of a man who believed his secret world was still hidden. He did not know that I had spent the hours before dawn not in sleep, but in a final, terrible vigil. I had scrolled through the evidence on my phone one last time, the time-stamped hotel receipts, the candid photo of them laughing in a dimly lit restaurant booth, the love note sent from Robert's number that was not meant for my eyes. Each piece was a shard of the beautiful glass ornament that was our family, and I had collected every single one. I stood by the Christmas tree, its lights unplugged now, the ornaments looking like gaudy, meaningless trinkets. My fingers hovered over the screen. There was no hesitation, only a profound, chilling certainty. I selected Marcus's contact and forwarded everything. The whoosh sound of the sent message was the loudest noise in the world. It was the sound of a door slamming shut forever. Then I climbed the stairs. My footsteps did not falter. I pushed open the door to our bedroom. Robert was sprawled on his side of the bed, the duvet rumpled. He looked older in his sleep, the lines on his face deeper. "Robert," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the tremor I felt inside. "You need to wake up." He stirred, grumbling. "Clara, what is it? It is early." "You need to get up," I repeated. "You need to pack a bag and you need to leave this house. Immediately." That got his attention. He pushed himself up on his elbows, confusion and irritation warring on his face. "Leave? What on earth are you talking about? It is Christmas." "I know what day it is," I said, and I held up my phone, the screen displaying the damning chain of messages I had just sent to his son. "And I know what you have been doing. It is over. Get out." The color drained from his face. It was a satisfying, terrible thing to witness. The bluster came first, as I knew it would. "Clara, whatever you think you have seen, it is a misunderstanding. Let us talk about this like adults." "There is nothing to talk about," I said, cutting him off. My voice was like ice. "The talking is done. I have sent everything to Marcus. He will be here soon, and I would not want you to be here when he arrives. It would be messy." The mention of Marcus's name, the realization that the veil had been torn away not just from my eyes but from his son, struck him like a physical blow. He scrambled out of bed, his movements clumsy with panic. "You did what? You foolish woman, what have you done?" "I have taken out the trash," I said, and I turned and walked out of the room, leaving him to his frantic packing. I went back downstairs and stood sentinel in the living room, waiting for the next earthquake. It did not take long. The roar of an engine, the screech of tires on the quiet street, the slam of a car door, it was a violent symphony. Marcus did not knock. The front door flew open and he stood there, framed in the doorway, his face a mask of pure, undiluted fury. He was not carrying gifts. His hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists. "Where is he?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Before I could answer, Robert appeared at the top of the stairs, a hastily packed suitcase in his hand. The sight of his son seemed to root him to the spot. "Marcus," he began. "Son, let me explain." That was all it took. Marcus let out a guttural cry, a sound of such raw betrayal that it seemed to suck all the air from the house. He charged across the living room, past the sparkling tree, and lunged up the stairs. He did not throw a punch. He grabbed his father by the front of his robe and shoved him hard against the banister. A framed family photo from years ago shook and clattered to the floor, the glass shattering. "You pathetic old man," Marcus screamed, his face inches from Robert's. "My wife, you were sleeping with my wife." "It was not like that," Robert pleaded, his voice trembling. "It was a mistake." "A mistake," Marcus shook him. "You have been making this mistake for months, behind my back, in my house." The words were a torrent of pain, each one lashing out. I stood below, a silent witness to the destruction of the two men I had loved most in the world. The festive decorations around me seemed to mock the scene, the cheerful reds and greens a grotesque contrast to the ugliness unfolding. It was then that Marcus seemed to remember I was there. He released his father with a shove of disgust and turned his rage-filled eyes on me. "And you," he spat, "you knew. How long did you know, Mother? Were you going to just let it continue?" "I found out recently," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "And I knew I had to end it, for all of us. But you need to hear the whole story, Marcus. You need to hear it from her." His jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone, his thumb jabbing at the screen. "Maya," he barked into the phone, "get over here, now, to my mother's house. It is an emergency." He did not wait for a reply, simply ended the call. The wait for Maya was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The three of us existed in a frozen tableau of hatred and shock. Robert remained on the landing, slumped against the wall. Marcus paced the living room like a caged animal, kicking a stray gift box out of his path. I did not move from my spot. I was the still point in the turning world, the architect of this reckoning, and I would not flinch. When Maya arrived, she looked small and frightened, still in her Christmas pajamas under a coat. She took in the scene, Marcus's rage, Robert's defeat, my cold stillness, and her face crumpled. She knew. "Maya," Marcus said, his voice dangerously calm. "My father, is it true?" She looked from him to Robert, a silent plea for help that went unanswered. The weight of the evidence, the crushing pressure of the moment, was too much. She broke. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, a sob wrenching itself from her throat. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, it is true." Marcus recoiled as if she had struck him. The confirmation, spoken aloud, was somehow more final than all the digital proof I had sent him. "Why?" he asked, the word a choked whisper full of agony. "Was I not enough for you? Was he better?" "No," Maya cried, wrapping her arms around herself. "No, Marcus, it was never about that. It was about me. I felt trapped. I have felt trapped for years. Your ambition, your constant work, you're your distance. I am just an accessory in the story of Marcus Thorne. I am the wife in the background. With Robert, I felt seen. For a moment, I felt like a person again, not a prop. It was wrong, I know it was wrong, but it was an escape. A stupid, horrible escape from a life that was suffocating me. Her confession hung in the air, a deeper, more painful truth than simple lust. It was a truth about a marriage that had been dying long before the affair began. Marcus stared at her, and I saw the rage in his eyes begin to mix with a dawning, horrible understanding. He had been betrayed, but he was also being confronted with his own role in the tragedy. He did not say another word. He just turned, walked to the door, and left. The sound of the door closing behind him was softer than I expected, but more final than any slam could have been. Maya stood there for a moment, a lost child, before she too turned and fled into the Christmas morning. Robert was the last to go. He carried his suitcase down the stairs, avoiding my gaze. He paused at the door. "Clara, he began, but I held up a hand. "Just go, Robert," I said. "There is nothing left to say." And then he was gone. The house was suddenly, profoundly quiet. The only evidence of the storm was the shattered photo frame on the floor and the lingering tension in the air. I was alone, truly alone. I walked through the rooms, my hand trailing over the furniture. The big, quiet house felt different now. It was not a home anymore, it was a structure. A shell that had held a life that was, it turned out, mostly an illusion. I felt a strange emptiness, but it was not entirely unpleasant. It was the emptiness of a field after a fire, scorched and barren, but clear. The ruin of the false life had been cleared away. The lies had been burned up in the brutal honesty of the morning. I was not a victim. I was a survivor. I had wielded the truth like a weapon, and I had destroyed the world I knew, but I was still standing. I looked out the window at the perfect, frost-covered lawn. The future was a blank page, terrifying and uncertain, but it was mine alone to rebuild. There was a somber closure in that stark truth. Yet, as I stood there in the silence, a single, treacherous thought whispered from the ashes of the old life: what have I done? And in that question, a new kind of chill took hold, the first tremor of a loneliness I could not yet comprehend.